Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Skyline College Learning Community's career panel discussion on business, entrepreneurship, and management. That's a mouthful. A big thank you to our panelists for joining us in this discussion, and thank you to all of you out there viewing from wherever you happen to be right now. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Saida Stroud, and I'm the director of the Bay Area Entrepreneur Center of Skyline College. For those of you who don't know, the Bay Area Entrepreneur Center is Skyline's off-site business hub. We serve the business community in downtown San Bruno. So welcome. Right now, I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves. Francis?
Hello, my name is Francis Fernandez. I work for Sterling Bank in San Francisco's financial district. I'm a portfolio manager in the commercial real estate department. Yeah.
Thank you, Francis. Welcome to the panel. Josh.
My name is Josh Kizler. I own a coffee shop in Pacifica, California, and it kind of doubles as a community art and business space.
And what's the name of that coffee shop, Josh?
Kizler Coffee.
Awesome. Thank you. Welcome to the panel.
Thank you.
Evan.
Hi, my name is Evan. I, together with my brother Jesse and a handful of volunteers, we run a website called Climate Careers. The URL is just climate.careers. We're on the mission to help people align their paychecks and their 40 hours a week with the work that needs to be done to solve the climate crisis. So, yeah.
How awesome to have you. Thank you for joining us, Evan. Miriam.
Hi there, Miriam Ortiz Renzi. I'm an attorney. I practice law out of San Jose. I run my own law practice. I go by the moniker of More Law, and I've been doing it for about 2 years, and just recently started focusing on small businesses, actually, advising small businesses and creating a business model that makes legal resources affordable to those who can't necessarily afford an in-house counsel. So I am your preventative medicine for small business, preventative legal medicine.
Yeah. Totally. And I agree with Josh's thumbs up. So very awesome to have you here, Miriam. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
Theresa.
Hi, my name is Theresa, and I'm the Executive Assistant to the President at Skyline College. Skyline College is one of 3 community colleges of the San Mateo County Community College District, and we're located between San Francisco and the Silicon Valley. One neat tidbit about me is from being a student assistant to now being the executive assistant to the college president with staff, I have served Skyline College community for over 30 years. That's my little tidbit.
Thank you, Theresa. That is quite a career. My goodness. Okay, so before we move into the questions segment of the discussion, I'd like to invite everyone out there to join us live on Wednesday, May 13th at 7 p.m. With all of these panelists who will be available for actual questions and to continue the conversation about careers based off of today's discussion. So note any questions that you might have as you're watching, and you're going to share them live on the 13th. Be sure to like Skyline College Learning Communities on Facebook, and stay tuned for any other career panels that we might be having in the coming weeks. All right, let's get started. So Theresa, I actually have, the first question is for you. Please tell us, how did you know you wanted to do what you're doing?
Well, it started back when I was just a little girl. I used to love playing office. My dad was an owner of a scavenger company, and he would bring me home office material, furniture, desks, calculators, and so on. So from a little girl, I just loved playing office. And so when I grew up in high school, I started taking all the classes you needed to work in an office. And when I got to college, I got to Skyline College, I decided to take, at the time it was called OFAD, it was Office Administration, and I was just going for a certificate. Come to find out that if I had just taken a few more classes, I can get my associate degree. So I got my associate degree, so I got an associate in science for administrative assistant. So it goes back. It's something I've always wanted to do, and I love my job. So you have to love what you do because you spend 90% of your life with your coworkers and your career. And so you really have to find what you love and then have fun with it.
Yeah, thank you, Theresa. Couldn't agree more. It's very important if you're lucky to be able to enjoy the work that you spend so much time doing. And I actually have the same question for you, Francis. How did you know that this is what you wanted to do?
I actually, I didn't. I really fell into banking and finance. Right after college, I did a number of different jobs. I really tried to do some searching as to what really interested in me. I worked on bicycles when I was like in my early 20s. I sold toys to different small businesses in San Francisco. I even worked for a very short stint in China doing marketing. So banking was never really my thing. But you know, you go through a process and you find the things that you like and you try to combine them with things that you're passionate about. And sometimes you're lucky enough at some point in your career that those two things collide. And luckily for me, that happened. So it really wasn't something I planned for, but I was just lucky enough to kind of get to it.
Yeah, for sure. There are two different sides of that coin, right? Yeah, thank you for sharing. And that's some real talk, how things just align. So thank you, Francis. Josh, the next question is for you. How did your earlier career choices or decisions that you made lead you to where you are now? You know what? We're muted.
Oh,
yeah, there you
I
go.
was gonna. I'm gonna piggyback off of what Francis said. I feel like my earlier career choices stumbled a bit, and I was never really career oriented. I always kind of wanted to be in business, and most of the jobs I had, I focused on the admin side, some finance, organization, like assisting teams, and so as a kid, I always imagined having my own business, and then some life events occurred, and the puzzle pieces kind of fell in front of me to make the leap to go into business. So it was a childhood dream, but it was also like just life and some odd jobs, even career, I guess I could say, jobs that eventually just pointed me in the path of now is the time to go into business, now or never, basically.
Right. And sometimes that's how things happen. Thank you. Thank you, Josh. Evan, can you tell us, when it comes to you founded a company, what did you have to do to be prepared for that? What research did you do? I imagine you did some extensive research if it's related to climate and also owning a business. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, the origin story really stemmed from, I guess my market research too stemmed from my own experience trying to find an opportunity where I could use my skills and my background, but apply it in a way that could be a part of solving climate change. And I just found that process to be so difficult and confusing. And I just felt like there should be a better way. And I've heard, the expression that the best ideas for entrepreneurs to work on are usually the ones that come from a problem that they themselves are facing. So that was sort of my story. And I should clarify, I feel like I'm still finding the company in many ways. Being a founder almost implies that it's a past tense thing, but I feel like we're very early stage, and we're still just sort of getting the ball rolling, I think.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. And so I actually have a follow-up question for Miriam, because you run your own law office, your own practice. And can you tell us, just to piggyback off of Evan, is there a difference between being a business owner and being in management? And what is the difference?
I would say yes. I am a solo practitioner and I have not had to manage anyone on a long-term basis yet. But I will say that because, when you start your own law practice or any business for that matter, you kind of start, unless you have some huge angel investors backing you up, you kind of start small. You start on a shoestring budget. You're really trying to keep costs low. So maybe like employees isn't, is that what we mean by management? Do we mean management people or management? Because it's a loaded question for me because for me, it's the practice of law, which is one thing, a totally different skill set than actually running your own business, right? If you're going to run your own business, I feel like you have to be gutturally honest with your strengths and your weaknesses. I am terrible at taxes and finances. So I know as a business owner, like I need a good tax person. I need, this is something I need to farm out. I also know I do pretty well with people, so I'm comfortable with that. So I'm like, okay, I will deal with like my marketing and getting out there and, doing this, right? So knowing my strengths and weaknesses. The management part, I rely a lot on software to do that for me. So wherever I can find something to kind of streamline, my processes, my business, so that I can focus on like doing really what I love, right? You start throwing, gosh, I just remember just like the hiring processes or like, like trying to just find somebody to outsource work to. There is a skill to it. And also be honest with yourself as a business owner if you don't have that skill, because you can go and outsource that too. There's companies that'll find people for you. So that's important too. I was all over the place there, but I hope I answered most of that for you.
Yeah, you totally did. Absolutely. You have to know what you're good at for sure. And know where to outsource. I think that was excellent. And another question. So you mentioned, when you started your business and you learned a lot of things, what would you say was your first win? And either after becoming an attorney or opening your practice?
I would say like my first win came after identifying all my failures. I had to fail a lot. I had to find what didn't work. I messed up a lot. I made really, just where I'm like, God, why am I paying for this like software? And I'm not even, just like figuring it out, and I feel like that was my biggest win. That was my biggest success is like having something click where I'm like, oh, this is how I can become more effective, or, oh, I really don't have to struggle here in this area. So my win for me, it was like finally identifying my failures, understanding them, understanding what wasn't working, and saying, okay, now that we got that under control, let's really go for it.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, ma'am. That's a really good segue into our questions about failure and mistakes and risk. And so my next question, Francis, is for you. And you've been all over. And so please tell us what, I don't want to say misstep, but can you talk a little bit about mistakes? Have you made them? Silly question. Have you made them? And what mistakes did you make? What was the misstep?
I made plenty of mistakes. When you're in business, whether you're an entrepreneur or you're in consulting like me, or you were in consulting, anything to do with working with clientele, like you're gonna have a lot of problems, and you're not gonna always have the solution. And the point of fact is that in order to really succeed, you're going to have to take and embrace those missteps and realize that those missteps are there. So for me, I've had plenty, from having the wrong career path to having another wrong career path to spending 1 month here doing something that wasn't going to turn into a career to spending a year or two. It all really depends on how honest one can be with themselves in the scenario that they're in. Sometimes it has to do with the the field that you're in. Sometimes it has to do with the people that you work with. You just really have to be honest with yourself. And, you know, like you had said, maybe you don't want to call it a misstep because, you know, that's just what life is. So it's not really a misstep. It's just life happening.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Francis. Josh, talk to us about risk. I'd like you to tell us, what's the biggest risk you've taken?
Pre-COVID, I guess. I'll have to, because right now I feel like I'm taking more risk than I've taken in my whole life. I mean, going into business was a big risk. I mean, I put everything we had into a business that it could have failed. I could have failed. Our financial future could have failed. And you know, I took a leap. I believed in myself. I had a plan. It wasn't written. I didn't know all the details. I didn't know where the path would lead me. I didn't know what the business would look like. There were so many unknowns for me, and I just kind of leapt in. And the reason I did that was life had taught me that it was just worth it. It was worth it for me to leap and see where I would go. And I kind of felt like, even though that was a big risk for me, I had nothing to lose. You know, I'd still be alive, and my family would be alive. And if the business failed, then it was still a risk worth taking. So for me, that was definitely the biggest risk, was just actually going into business.
Yeah, for sure. And Josh, why was it a risk worth taking? Really quick.
The opportunity cost of what my other life would look like if I hadn't taken that risk.
Yeah, I love that answer. Thank you. Awesome. We're going to shift just a little bit and talk more about industries and what's happening with them now, and then what can we expect. So Theresa, I'd like to ask you next, how has your field, clerical office manager field, how has that field changed in the last 5 years? What can we expect in the next 5, maybe even 10, if you can speak to that?
Well, I'm just going to share with you.
I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
No.
Oh.
Louder.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? I don't know what happened. Let me check my technology. Let me go.
You're better.
Better?
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, so let me just tell you a little tidbit really quick. 30 years ago, when I started working as a student worker at Skyline College, I was using the old phones with the big square buttons that you would have to press down to answer a call. Okay, and now we're at a technology where you can probably answer your office phone on your cell phone. I think with our current situation in our working environment, I see more ability to be able to work from home, as difficult it could be. I think it's going to open up opportunities for individuals that can work more from home. I think in technology, I'm not quite sure. I think Zoom is such a huge program app that has just come so popular in the last 7 weeks. I think that's going to evolve, and we're going to be using more of that. I think there's going to be less travel, more Zoom. But I just have to wait and see. Everything's so new right now, and technology changes so quickly. So I think there's going to be a need of some more support for administrative professionals in the areas of technology as well. I just don't know what that's going to be or what it's going to look like.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Theresa. That support is probably going to be relatively important as we think about how we're shifting. Next question. I think I'm going to ask, so Evan, this might seem like a silly question, but it's not. What are some ways, so you and other folks in that space, in the environmental space, what are they doing to change the world? What ways are they changing the world?
Well, we have a lot of changes that need to be done because we are on the wrong path. So basically right now, I think there's been sort of a lot of, without knowing sort of the audience's understanding of sort of like climate science or climate change just very broadly, what I'll say is like at a very high level, we're like kind of headed off the cliff in terms of our the amount of like carbon emissions that we're producing globally, and so there's a variety of different sources ranging from travel to agriculture. Obviously, energy production is a huge one, and the solutions to how we curb climate change basically range from producing food in different ways, cutting back on certain kinds of food that we are producing and consuming. So I think folks are probably pretty familiar with the idea that that people need to be eating less red meat because the production of this kind of meat is extremely carbon intensive in that it's producing a lot of emissions. So organizations that are working on meat alternatives, and again, I'm focusing on something that like I think folks might be familiar with. Organizations like Impossible Foods, Beyond Meat, and there's like a whole slew of different organizations now that are producing meat alternatives. That would be like one of many, many different examples of organizations that are working on changing the way that we eat, move, live, and I would say like another great example is transportation. We're seeing that there's I think Tesla is leading the way in making electric cars sort of the new normal. Since Tesla has really forged that path, we're seeing now a lot of other organizations, a lot of other manufacturing companies producing electric mobility solutions. So we just basically, broadly speaking, like we have to kind of change pretty much everything that we do in our day-to-day lives. And it's kind of an overwhelming thing to be thinking about, but we've done it many times before. Looking back at the past 150 years, radical change is totally possible. It's just a matter of, if we as a society are willing to, get to work on this.
Evan, thank you. That was a serious answer, but some definite real talk. I do hope that change becomes trendy. I really do, because I think you're spot on. Miriam, speaking of trends, can you speak to some of the trends in your field for 2020 and what do you see beyond?
Trends for 2020. I think people are thinking differently now about how we practice law. Whether you're a solo practitioner or a big law firm. It used to be if you're in a big law firm, because I did that life too, it's all about the billable hour and, how much you bill. And, you're just kind of like this, you're part of a cog in a machine, right? And I think the way that, everything now is virtual, things are streamlined. Like, do we really need to be in that office? Like, 8, 9, 10 hours a day? There is just, people are rethinking the way we live. This is kind of a little COVID segue, but I'll save that for later. So what I've seen in my industry, and it's kind of akin to what I'm doing, is trying to find a way to provide like legal in a different way. So I don't know if any of you have heard of like Legal Shield or anything like that, but people start doing these prescription packages where you can ask a lawyer. I think Legal Shield actually went bankrupt, but different story. But along that same vein, it's actually kind of part of my business model as well, where I'm finding a different way to package or provide information, consulting, and advice to people, right? Do you really have to pay 15 grand for retainer up front and, get charged, for every 15 minutes that you talk to someone to get advice? That's the old model. And I think that is changing a bit. So I think we're going to see the legal industry change in that way. And also in terms of just a work-life balance. Do we need to be in that office every day? Or is there another way to live? Right? So.
Yeah, absolutely. Miriam, thank you. I love that. Is there another way to live? I think both you and Evan you guys touched on that. We are really thinking about that right now because we're forced to. So my next question is for you, Francis. Can you tell us a little bit about getting ahead, right? What has helped you move ahead in your field, in finance, and what advice do you have for anyone out there, students or otherwise, that are looking to get into what you're doing?
And in your early 20s, you got to gamble with your time. You seriously do. And when you get to the right organization and you get to the right opportunities that are in front of you, that's the point in your life where you have to ask yourself, what am I too prideful about? Because, maybe your boss is not so nice. Maybe the people that you work with are not so great. But if the opportunity is there, you should certainly tell yourself, well, maybe I shouldn't take things so personally, and take it one day at a time. So really, to really get ahead in life, it's really to drop your pride. My mom always told me pride will never feed you. So, people say that in sales, people say that in consulting, people say that when they start a business, you really have to put your pride aside and look at what is the end game? What do I want in life? What do I want from this career, from this organization, from this institution? What do I want? And, there are some organizations that will have a clear path for you. That's when you tell yourself, maybe this is not good for me. And there are some organizations where clearly it's there. That's where you really have to ask yourself, is this what I want? And you have to do a lot of, reflection and to preserve, your own ideals. If you really want something, you just really got to let that pride go. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, awesome advice. And for our listening audience that might not know what you meant, can you unpack gambling with your time? When you said when you're in your early 20s, you need to gamble a little bit with your time. What does that mean to you?
I mean, no matter what degree that you have, whether it's business administration, or maybe you studied mathematics, maybe you studied physics, sometimes those opportunities to get directly into that field are not there. So I think that sometimes if there's an opportunity to be employed by a certain organization, and maybe it's something that you like to do or want to try it, you should definitely do it, because there are aspects of every job title that you're going to take with you onto the next. So when I say gamble with your time, I mean throw out a lot of resumes. If you have already graduated or you're about to graduate, throw out your resumes. Another thing that I quote my mom a lot. My mom also taught me was when she was younger, she had 2 job opportunities. One was an accountant for a Gap, and another was an accountant for a very, very small organization. She prayed to God and she said, God, if I really need a job, whoever calls me first, I'm going to take that job. The small organization called her first. Gap called her literally a few hours later. She worked for the small organization. Because that organization was so small, she learned almost everything in that field within 1 or 2 years. As opposed to working for a very large organization, your title means that your workload is this much. So really gamble with your time, gamble with your resume. Your 20s is for this. You should definitely do it.
Yeah, I love it. And sometimes it does help to be a small fish, a big fish in a small pond, so to speak, right? Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Francis. My next question is really for Josh and Theresa, for both of you. What are some, and Theresa, I'll have you chime in first on this. Tell us some common misconceptions that people might have about the office assistant field, and what would you do to address those misconceptions?
Well, for some, they might think that it's not a very desirable or valuable field. Let's see. I've always wanted to do clerical work, be a secretary, as it used to be called. I've enjoyed it. It's a very important, people don't realize how important it is to have a really good support staff, anywhere from entry level to executive level. You know, every executive, doesn't matter, small company, a corporation, they have someone behind them every day to assist them in anything from scheduling an appointment, travel, creating documents. You know, there's so many little tasks, supporting the manager, supporting the executive leaders in any type of task, right? So I think people don't realize the importance of being a clerical staff, support staff. It's the backbone of an office. You know, I see it sometimes where some offices, the support staff isn't very strong, and the executive doesn't have the support they need. I love what I do. So, you know, schedule 5 meetings tomorrow, Theresa. I need them for, you know, I need them right. Okay, great. Let me go do that. You know, to me, it's a challenge. It's fun. But it's very important. You are dealing with an executive who has a minimal amount of time to take care of big decisions. And I've worked for vice presidents and now the president, and they have to make big decisions. So I'm there to help them get through that and support them. So it's a very important job.
Sorry about that. The follow-up, you know, is there anything you do to address those misconceptions that people might have?
Well, I guess I show people, I tell people the importance of our jobs, of our career. I sometimes serve on panels and whenever I have an opportunity to share my story. I think it's important that you do know what all the options you have when you are choosing your career. And this is a very, if you get into the right position in the right support staff role, you can live a nice life. So it's not like you're not getting paid well at even at an entry level. It's a good living. So you really should see all the options you have and just go for it. I mean, really, back in the day, you know, the word secretary, okay, so you get a little bit of money, you get a little bit of support. Today, it's different. It's way different. There's so many opportunities. There's opportunities for professional development. There's opportunities financially. There's so much. So, yeah.
Myself. Thank you, Theresa. Yeah, for sure. And I imagine, especially as we're seeing things shift to a very virtual space, that'll be interesting, how some of those misconceptions are really brought to light. So thank you for that. Josh, you have the exact same question. Please.
I think there's a few misconceptions. One of them I was guilty of, that owning a cafe is romantic. Sitting having a cappuccino is romantic, but owning a cafe, there's very few cappuccinos being sipped. It's replace the romantics kind of with stress. You know, so that's a big misconception. It's not easy, and that's any business. That kind of the buck stops with me. And that's the nice part, is they're my problems. But I also get tired of my problems. So, you know, I need to find solutions fast. My livelihood depends on finding solutions, and that is the most stressful thing that I've ever experienced, and I experience it routinely. It's part of my job, and then those lulls are amazingly enjoyable. When I can, I mean, I used to go to other coffee shops to go sit and enjoy coffee, because I couldn't do it in my coffee shop for probably the first 4 years of business. And after a while, I got to a point, I got a solid team. I mean, I'm still not, you know, like sitting on the river with coffee, but it's gotten to a point where it's better. So.
Well, it is certainly important to get better, for sure. Josh, what do you say to people that have those misconceptions? What are things you do to try to dispel some of those misconceptions?
I mean, a lot of people ask me about, you know, getting into business, and I always try to encourage. I tend to be guilty of asking really critical questions, and it can kind of, I guess, rain on somebody's. I try not to rain on someone's dream. I just try to provide a very real outlook, and I'm always open to sharing my thoughts and experiences, and trying to get people to think about their plans if they intend to go into business. And I mean, if they ask me specifically about a cafe, I'm happy. I don't keep secrets about what we do. So I really try to urge people to think realistically about what they're approaching. You know, risk is great, but I take risks, but I always calculate my risks, sometimes better than others, and it's that calculation that really makes the risk either less painful or, you know, more appropriate, really. So that's my advice.
Yeah, it's an excellent answer. Thank you, Josh, for sure. You have to be real with people, right? You're not doing them any favors. I have kind of a fun question. I'm just going to mix things up a little bit. Evan, did you just take off a ponytail or something? What's happening?
Yeah, no.
Hair. Okay. Yeah, you're definitely getting the fun question. What did you do at work yesterday?
What did I do at work yesterday? I sent out our newsletter, which went out to like 5,000 people, I want to say. So, you know, it's always kind of stressful when you're doing something that's going to reach so many inboxes. So spent a decent amount of time editing that. I did a couple sales calls, talking to different climate employers, and, you know, kind of giving them the run through of what we have to offer. And chatted with my brother, one of my engineers, who's a friend who's just volunteering, and I took a moment to take care of myself. I went on a bike ride, and, you know, for me, that's how I sort of like separate from the constant feeling that I'm always working. I feel like so, I mean, this is the first time I've ever tried to start any organization, you know, any company of my own. You know, it's kind of just as I expected. It's like the work never ends. And so therefore it's really important to know when to sort of give yourself a break. And something my brother sent me a couple of days ago, it was, I thought, just like so relevant to how I've been feeling is just, it was like a meme that said, like, taking care of yourself is being productive. So I did a bunch of like actual productive things, but then I also did another productive thing, which is, you know, taking care of myself and trying to provide that balance.
Yes, definitely. Balance is so important. Thank you for sharing that. And you should share that meme, by the way. I'm sure people have seen it, but you should share it in the chat, and maybe we'll put it up when this goes live. So thank you, Evan. Miriam, let's talk a little bit, shifting back to career stuff. Okay, 2 questions. Did you always want to be a lawyer? If not, do you remember one specific thing you did that put you on that path, or something you wish you had done to get to where you are?
Yeah. That's like a 2-realm question for me. So getting to law school, getting to law school was one thing, right? And that path was different. I had a travel bug when I did Rotary International at 17, and I was like, this is the life. And I just want to be some kind of diplomat and do international work, whatever that is, because I was in love with traveling, and all these UN ambassadors were attorneys. So I was like, well, if I want to be a UN ambassador, then I have to be an attorney, and or I have to have a law degree. So then fast forward, and I do go to law school. And then once I get into law school, I'm like, whoa, it's just a different beast. And not everyone in law school is there to be a UN ambassador. So like, it was very naive how I kind of went into it. I was like the fool, like not looking off the cliff where I was about to jump. And, but then I did it, and then I was in it. And then I was like, this is actually, maybe this is for me. I love a good debate. But then, that was like phase 1, right? And then I go from like wanting to be this UN ambassador to actually really getting into law, and, did a couple internships, and some of the work was really exciting. Working with like a county council, doing a lot of work with the county. I got to go to a couple morgues, just random stuff. So I was like, okay. And then, when I actually graduated, I realized, oh my gosh, like even just within the field of law, there are so many different things you can do. I mean, I did everything from I did workers' compensation law, which was just soul crushing work, like pushing my soul through a cheese grater work. And, there was just different types of law that were, and then I ended up going to a firm, and I thought that was like the way to go. And I was like, yay, I'm at this firm now in San Francisco, and it's like a hot, sexy law firm. This is going to be great. And, I was working with like clients like McDonald's, but, again, the work ended up being just like kind of soul crushing, like, oh, another slip and fall at McDonald's, it's just, so, even within that realm, it's like, just kind of what Francis said before about like, I think you have to gamble with your time all the time, I feel like, because, you don't really know what it is that gets you until you kind of do it. Like there were so many things that I thought sounded sexy, like, ooh, entertainment law, that sounds sexy. But when you really look at what entertainment lawyers do, it's kind of dry and transactional, and you're not really, so, going finally into my own law practice, after having delved into so many different areas, it's kind of funny. I ended up just developing a business model off of like the very few clients that I really did enjoy working with, where I did get excited. And it just so happened to be business owners where they had real problems. And it was like, all right, we're going to this negotiation, and it's like some huge conflict, and we're playing chicken at the end of the day to see who's going to pony up, whatever money to like fix this problem. And it was exciting. And I was actually really helping business owners, and I could, I could see the difference I was making. So I was like, oh, I finally found my calling. But, it took a while. It was very roundabout. I wasn't like, I forget which speaker it was. She said, there's 2 kind of paths. You're either a jackhammer or a hummingbird. Like there's some people that just know what they want to do, and they're like, they just do it. They're so passionate, and like, I was more like a hummingbird. I had to like go from flower to flower to flower to flower, just figuring out like what the hell it was that I really clicked with. And along that way, I found it. I feel like I'm like, okay, now we're good. And it's always evolving, so it's always evolving. I mean, if you're going to stay static, you're not growing. So yeah. kind of over answered there.
No, the answer is great. The answer is great. And change, we have to be able to adapt and figure it out for sure. Yes, 100%. My next question is going to be, I think we've got a little bit more time than I thought we'd have, so I've got a couple more questions for you guys. Theresa, practical advice. You seem like a very practical person. What's one piece of practical advice you would give to someone starting out in your field, in your area?
So for me, it would be being patient, listen to your colleagues for advice, and also receiving feedback from people that have done it already. And don't worry about making mistakes, because it's the only way we learn. So when I started out in 1990, as a student worker at Skyline College, I worked in the vice president's office. I think I worked 20 hours a week, and I started working for the vice president of student services and his assistant at the time. And as my years progressed, because I worked there for 3 years, and my skills progressed because I was taking classes for working in an office, I started working with other offices, the president's office, the other vice president, the budget office. And there were a group of women who I would consider were traditional secretaries, and they taught me everything I know today. It gets me very emotional because some of them are no longer with us. But if it wasn't for them, I would not be where I'm at today. With my mistakes, they taught me how to get through it and learn, from giving advice on everything from how to, anything from how, maybe somebody comes up to you and doesn't talk very nicely to you, and how you be polite and be generous, to working with students, and when students come up and they might not be happy with something that's happened to them, how you can keep them calm, and how the tone of your voice can bring an irate student down to a very calming student. So you really have to listen to people and take their advice, take their feedback, and that's how you really learn. And I think that goes with a lot of positions, a lot of careers. But for me, if it wasn't for those women, I don't know where I would be. I would probably still be a support staff somewhere, but I wouldn't have the skills I have today that now I can share with others.
Yeah, thank you, Theresa. Feedback is tough to take, but super important, right? And I actually really like this question, and I want to hear from everyone, if that's all right. I'm going to ask everyone to give me their perspective on this. So Evan, if you would please, what's the one piece of practical advice you could give someone, and I'd say starting out with starting their own company in that space?
Well, I would say to anyone who's interested in starting your own company, you should go work for someone else first. I mean, like everything, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm still learning like every single day, and it's always from the mistakes I make. But fortunately, I get to piggyback off of the learning lessons of the founders that I've worked for prior to my own experience starting climate careers. So, if you want to work at a startup, go work at a startup. If you want to start a coffee shop, I imagine Josh would suggest working at a coffee shop. If you want to be a lawyer, you should probably intern for one. So, and I think with that, I would also suggest this is like kind of a more specific sort of reply, but like get really familiar with technology. I mean, I imagine that you already are, those of you who are watching this right now, but like the more you can learn about what goes into what's behind the scenes of the technology that you use, the more empowered you're going to be to use it and use it to your advantage. So yeah, I know that there's going to be a lot of different people watching this with completely different career aspirations, but what I will say is if you want a job that will have some real security, I would highly recommend learning how to code. I mean, it's such a cliche, but I think it's a really valuable skill set. Even just taking a couple classes just to get familiarized is going to give you a huge leg up in whatever it is that you go on to next, even if it isn't coding. So that's my suggestion.
Yeah, I love it. I love it, Evan. Thank you. It's important for students to hear that, for a lot of people to hear that. But yes, go ahead.
Yeah, another thing is like, I really like the concept of ikigai. It's a Japanese concept that I was introduced to a couple years back, and it's basically the overlap of 4 key areas. It's what do you like doing, what are you good at doing, what can you get paid to do, and what does the world need? And unfortunately, I think that in our society, oftentimes we only talk about the first 3, right? Like, what do you like doing? What are you good at, and what can you get paid to do? But I think like real, like long-term meaning and a sense of fulfillment and purpose comes from that 4th sort of piece intersecting with those 3, which is what does the world need? There's a lot of problems right now that we're facing, whether it be supply chain issues due to global warming, whether it be racial and gender inequality, whether it be corruption in our politics. And so I really think, thinking about identifying problems that you resonate with, problems that really piss you off, that you want to see changed, and then asking yourself, well, what can I do with the skill sets I have to change those problems? And if your conclusion is, well, this one problem that I care so much about, I just don't have the skill sets to really, tackle it, perhaps consider, developing those skill sets. But I just think that, if you can find a way of doing something that meets all 4 of those areas, it's going to be easier the longer you go in your career, because careers aren't easy. Jobs are difficult, no matter what it is, no matter how much you get paid. It's always going to be a challenge. So when you have a sort of a mission that you really resonate with, that you're working towards, I think that's what's going to keep you going in those tough moments.
Awesome. Yes. When we think about having a mission, it's usually we think about business and what is your business's mission, but absolutely people have to have that mission for themselves, for sure. Thank you, Evan. Francis, same question.
I think I totally agree with what Evan said. The first thing that came out of his mouth was what I was thinking too. The reason why is there's one aspect of working for someone or working for an organization where you have to find mentorship, and that's how you learn like how things work, how the mechanics of a business works. But another thing is it's so you learn how it is to be at the very beginning, because when you do become an entrepreneur or you go into management, you're gonna have to learn how to manage people. And in order for you to do that effectively and efficiently, it's humanistic across the board. And unless you were there, unless you struggled, unless you felt the pain of being at the bottom of an organization, I think it's very hard for a manager to be truly effective. So yeah, it's really, work for someone, work for an organization that you feel is you're passionate about.
That is excellent advice, Francis. Thank you. Thank you. Sometimes starting from the bottom, it definitely gives you, it's a leg up, right? Josh, same question.
I have 2 parts. One, I keep forgetting Morlaw's name. I just see Morlaw. But know your weaknesses, practically speaking. It took me a while Miriam, to really know my weaknesses, especially at running a business. And now that I do, not that I can't learn things, but I know that there are field experts, and so I just weigh, is this worth it for me to struggle right now because I have other things to do, versus networking and finding someone who is way better at it. And so outsourcing or collaborating with other people. And then a little more philosophical, I guess, is to not be comfortable. because I think it's kind of the death of business. Even if businesses are alive, I think there's a lot of walking dead businesses, and they just are able to, trying not to name call big businesses here, but they just keep going on the same leverage that they have for decades. And there's small businesses that are guilty of it too. And moderating change really, and within myself, and seeing what I want my business to become, and not being complacent with it, because there's change is good, I feel like. And also, if I'm comfortable, then that means that I'm doing everything right. And I mean, it's hypercritical, I suppose, but I don't think any business is perfect, and there's always improvements to be made. So again, just not being comfortable and complacent in your business and even your job. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but I think in terms of wanting to push change and wanting to improve, don't get comfortable. That would be my advice.
Great advice, Josh. Thank you. Yeah, if you want to improve, definitely being comfortable does not help in that effort. Thank you. Miriam.
Forgive me, that I've heard such great advice. Everyone's given awesome answers. So the question is, what advice would you give for, can you repeat the question? No.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Let me make sure I'm not muted. So one piece of, and it's a loaded question, it's a lot anyway, but one piece of practical advice that you would give to someone starting out, either as being a lawyer or starting out opening their own business. So you can pick or do both.
Yeah. I have to kind of stand with there has to be a gut check. And I think the reason for that is that a lot of the reason people will go into business for themselves is because they are not satisfied with where they are. Because it just goes back to what I said earlier about, finding a different way to live, not really enjoying your construct or whatever it is that you're doing. And I think this goes a lot with like the entrepreneurial spirit, is just finding your own way to live or finding your own path, so to speak. And to take that jump, yes, it is a risk, but what's the other risk? You continue to live at some, soul crushing job that you are, completely dissatisfied in. I mean, for me, it was like a sleep, eat, rinse, repeat cycle that I knew it like at a guttural, just like deep soul level, like this will kill me. Like I can't, there has to be something else here. And like I said, I was very naive when I went out and did this and started my own practice. So the really important, what saved me was actually just having mentors in the beginning. And I had the benefit of, having a husband with a secure job. So that was kind of like my little safety net. But, at some point, you really have to just kind of have that gut check. Like, what is your soul telling you in those moments where you're like, oof, it's something pushing you. So you got to listen to that. And then you kind of got to go through your own inventory. It's almost like any business goes through an inventory, right? Like you have to inventory yourself and say, okay. And it goes back to kind of what Evan was saying too. It touches upon what everyone was saying, right? Knowing what you're good at, knowing what you're, where you need help, and then finding those people, those mentors, the resources to kind of fill in those gaps. So, and you're always going to have to change. Like when you go into business, like one of my big, I've been trying to launch a website forever because it wasn't perfect and it wasn't this and it wasn't that. And at some point you just have to jump, right? At some point you just have to go and realize that you're always going to be pivoting. Your brand is going to change. Your strategy is going to change, but you got to pivot, you got to change and adapt, pivot. That was like my mantra for the first year. So.
And a very good one at that, Miriam. Thank you. You're telling her basically you got to check yourself. Yes. Yes. Agreed. So we have time for one more question. And again, I'm going to have everybody chime in on this. I think it'll be a much briefer question. So we're going to bring it back to our current state of affairs. We are all sheltering in place or sheltering somewhere. So we're going to talk a little bit about how the shelter in place order has impacted you. So tell us, and Miriam, I'm going to start with you, since you just said all those wonderful things. How has the shelter order impacted your workday?
Woo, yeah.
And how do you stay connected? Sorry.
Zoom. It's been the savior. And I actually, a lot of the courts were closed. I mean, courts are closed. My hearings were closed. Stuff was, shutting down. So part of the problem I had with my business was keeping up with the law work. And then it's twofold. Like I got to do the practice and then I got to do the business end of it. And it's almost like I went into hibernation. And I finally had the opportunity to just focus on the business part of it. And at first I felt like, a little guilty about it. And then I was like, no, I'm working. Like, this is part of me. I'm now in hibernation with the law stuff. And I set it up so that I'm maintaining, the flow. I'm lucky enough to have done that. And now I'm really just planning and really teasing out those ideas that I had, my marketing, how I'm going to go about it, joining social groups and connecting with other women that are entrepreneurs. And that's been amazing. And just the amount of feedback I've gotten from them and the collaboration, that's been amazing. So it's been a real game changer, actually. It's been this lull of, I guess I'm not technically, it doesn't, on the outside on paper, it wouldn't seem like I'm producing much, but I'm producing more than I ever have, I feel like, at the same time.
Thank you. Josh.
Can you repeat the question, Saida?
Sure. How has the shelter in place impacted your workday? Quickly, tell us. And how do you stay connected?
Well, my roles flipped again with my wife. So I was a full-time stay-at-home dad, and my business was basically running itself in a sense, not really, but she had everything on pause, and I had to save business. So I've been out. Our shop's open, and it's not like I haven't spent my 7-day work weeks at the shop, so that wasn't new, but it was a flip back. And you didn't ask about business, so I'm still out. I'm still out and about, and I still have to run errands. I'm still witnessing my business metamorphose during this shelter in place, seeing how it affects our old clientele and bring in clientele which seem to be not sheltering in place because I've never seen them before. I feel a lot like right now, because I'm working so much, that my existence is my business. And so do I have time to answer that in terms of my business at all, or?
Time. So if you can really quickly, just very quickly say how it's impacted your workday. That's what we're looking for.
Well, that's okay. That's fine. That's okay.
It's a lot. It's a lot. Francis, how has the shelter in place impacted your workday?
Working for corporate, things are extremely bureaucratic. So there's a lot of paperwork that you have to deal with. So, with that being said, going from working in an office to working at home, you lose a lot of the resources. So things are at a snail pace right now. So you have to adjust. as Miriam was talking about, was pivoting. But in terms of the speed of business, it's no longer there.
Interesting. Thank you, Francis. Theresa, how has the shelter order impacted your workday?
Well, I went from a full-time executive assistant to a full-time executive assistant / sixth grade teacher, and a mom and a wife. My day-to-day work is still the same. I'm trying to keep our college president on track with her appointments, with meetings, with getting projects done, submitting things, grants coming through. So my day has gotten more difficult, more challenging, yet I have to get it done. So I try to keep a regular schedule for my son and I in the morning. Luckily, my husband is still working, so he leaves early in the morning, and then it's my son and I throughout the day. So it's been a big challenge, but spending the time with my son right now, it's been amazing. But workload, it's a lot. It's sometimes working on the weekends. It's sometimes working at night in order to catch up. So it is a lot.
Well, I hear each and every one of you and on how different things are with the shelter order and in the midst of this pandemic. So with that was our last question. Miriam, Theresa, Josh, Francis, and Evan, thank you guys so much for your insights, your awesome advice, and just sharing a little bit about yourselves with the students and with the Skyline College community. Thank you guys so much. And as a reminder to everyone tuning in, many of Skyline College's resources have shifted and adapted to become virtual. This includes some important resources offered by the Bay Area Entrepreneur Center. That's right. This includes the internship program. The program is now virtual. It's really good for students looking to get started in their career. In addition to that, our one-on-one coaching is also available online. And so these coaches help with everything from pivot strategies to interview assistance for those of you that need help with that Zoom interview. So just wanted to let everyone know about that as well. Thank you again to our panelists. Everyone, please stay safe, stay healthy, and thank you.